All right, happy Friday night. Welcome again to our Friday night AMAs where you can ask me anything about data engineering. Tonight, we are going to talk about vibe coding. Super excited about that. We're going to talk about who is on the leaderboard for our Gambill uh, Gambill Gauntlet challenge for the data engineering questions, the interview questions. And finally, we are going to actually also talk about some common data engineering kind of concepts and how to explain those easily to non technical audiences. So, three really exciting situations that we're going to be getting into tonight. Super excited about that. So, let's jump right in. First, I do want to talk about who is on the leaderboard this week for the Gambill Gauntlet. We This week was the first week of the Gambill Gauntlet, where I ask you interview questions that are you might hear within your data engineering interviews, and give you an opportunity to answer those. Those videos come out on Monday at noon, and I give you an opportunity to answer those questions um, in the comments of the video, and then I provide feedback, provide points for each of the questions that you answer, and then those points get you on a leaderboard. So tonight we're going to be talking about that. Give me just a second. Let me pull up the leaderboard here, and I will share that with you all. There it is. So while I'm pulling that up, immediately following that, like I said, we're going to talk about vibe coding. What is vibe coding? Uh, Whether or not you should do it, how deep you should get into it, and kind of how dangerous it is. Vibe coding is kind of that 3 a.m. drunk dial of programming. So that's my personal opinion of it. So let me throw this leaderboard up over here and share that screen. So window, there it is. All right. So this week for the leaderboard for Gambill's Gauntlet, we have Rita. Super excited. Thank you so much for sharing your answers with us. So for those of you that didn't get a chance to go out and participate, make sure that you do. If again, you'll be part of the leaderboard. You will have. We'll talk about some of your answers and who had the best answer and what that answer was. Towards the end of the show, I'll actually be spotlighting one of his answers that he gave, and we'll get into that later. But want to shoot up that leaderboard really quick here. There's always an opportunity for you to answer those questions from those challenges during our Friday Night Live sessions by going out and watching that video, short video, and go out and answer those questions. And they will pop up. So super excited about that. So thank you again so much for watching that and answering those questions. All right, what is vibe coding? So let's talk a little bit about what is vibe coding. It's really hot right now, seems to be on a lot of people's minds. What is it, and what does it mean for data engineering, and what does it mean just in general for programming? So what is vibe coding? My personal opinion is vibe coding is kind of that 3 a.m. drunk dial of programming. It is when you are you know sitting there in front of a dim monitor. Maybe it's the middle of the night, maybe it's late evening, and you have been working all day and you just can't think anymore. So you dial up and pull up ChatGPT or Claude, and you just tell it, okay, this is what I want to do, and you blindly copy and paste whatever comes up there directly into your IDE, and run the code. And when it doesn't work, and I say when on purpose, then you go out and copy and paste that error message directly into your AI of choice, and give it, and take whatever it gives you back and copy and paste it again. You keep on doing that until you have a uh, working project, working prototype, or whatever it is that you're working on, whether it's a pipeline or whatever. So it's really like pairing an overconfident junior dev who never admits that they're wrong, because AI never admits they're wrong until after you call them out on it. Um, but this dev has seen every Stack Overflow thread and still somehow forgets some of those basic syntax rules. So, oh, who we got? Uh, oh, Nathan can't make it next week. Well, yeah, we'll re-roll. Uh, you're good, Nathan, man. Nihil, welcome, guys. Thanks so much for jumping on tonight. Super excited you're here. Nathan, we'll catch up. We'll catch up. I will say I'm super excited. One of the things that I'm super excited for coming up is well, we'll get into that later. Well, let's keep on rolling with a little bit of vibe coding here. Okay, so makes up new property. Yeah, it does make up new properties for sure. All of a sudden, you've got some library that pops in there that you're like, what is this? And it just made it up. When you ask, when you peg it about it, then it's like, oh yeah, I forgot. So yeah, okay, so the idea of vibe coding, you start with a vague idea. You kind of know what you want to build, and there's even voice, level. There's voice AI tools. You could even use the ChatGPT voice, and just talk back and forth to it, and it'll give you script. So you just say, hey, write me a Python script that automates this ETL for a real database and make it optimized. And you have no idea what you mean by optimized, nevertheless what it's going to spit out as optimized code. But you just go with it. And again, you just copy and paste AI code without reading it, without going through it. And this is the essential part of vibe coding: is you're not overthinking it. You're just going with the flow, which is the scary part, right? Because we all know that AI is not perfect. So you just copy and paste it directly into your IDE of choice and go with it. Uh, and then immediately, like I said, when it breaks, you just take that answer, take that error code, and copy and paste it directly in the chat GPT. It's going to be like, oh yeah, you're right, I forgot about that, and it's going to spit out new code, again, just like a junior dev might do. Thanks, guys. Okay, so you could, you ask AI, hey, what's wrong, what's up with this, and it does. It's just like, especially ChatGPT will say, "Oh yeah, you're right," and it'll give you that. Hey, the issue is that fetch all orders is returning none and adding a fetch all at the end, and you're like, "Oh yeah, we'll just do that," and copy and paste it, and like Nathan said, it's making up a new property, making up a new function that does not exist, and that it itself is not created yet, and you're like, oh, and you let it know, hey, there is no fetch all yet, and it'll be like, oh, let me make that for you. So you just keep on iterating. You just kind of keep on repeating that process until there's no errors, and then congratulations, the code now runs. It does something. Um, was it? Is it doing what you wanted it to? Is it the same code that it was that first output? Nobody knows. You're just vibe coding. You're just doing whatever, and that's the scary part. That's kind of like you know it's I saw another post earlier this week that, you know, should businesses just give people access to like databases and let them query it themselves? Let, business users just figure out SQL and query, data by themselves. Both of these things, vibe coding and giving business users, direct access to, raw data, is like a business horror movie for me. It would, you're asking for trouble. Giving users basically the keys to the castle to that data that they don't really know how to write an effective SQL statement. Nevertheless, a SQL statement that's not going to return duplicates, one that's going to return accurate information. These people, often have some type of inkling of what the data means, but haven't necessarily seen it in action and seen the raw data enough to know, be familiar enough with it to know, how to query it and what they're really looking for. It's terrifying. Then all of a sudden they start reporting on these things. Same thing with vibe coding. You're just yeah, vibe coding, absolutely. Vibe coding will encounter scalability challenges. It's just how it is. And it, that, again, that's the same. It's same thing with vibe coding. Giving, business users the keys to the castle with SQL. It, you're going to have scalability issues. You are going to have issues with accuracy. You're going to have issues with maintainability. You're going to have issues with the fact that nobody really knows what it's doing, because the people that are vibe coding don't really know how to program generally. They're just asking an AI how to, to write it for them. They just know what they want it to do. And the scary part is that a lot of times, both the SQL queries do this too, right? It's same concept, in my opinion. Um, it, things come back and it looks like, oh, hey, it works. It's doing exactly what I asked it to do. And in both cases, vibe coding and SQL, and sometimes, these business users might even be asking ChatGPT to give them a SQL statement. Um, is the data being returned? Is the program being written really what you're asking for? Really what you're expecting it to be? We all know, for those of us that have been in the industry, we all know that users have a concept. Business users particularly have this concept of, this is, in their head, they think this is what they want. They get it back. It kind of looks like what they're wanting, but generally they don't really know what they want and how to ask an AI or Google effectively and efficiently, um, what they're wanting so that they get back really what they're trying to get at. So vibe coding versus actual coding. Let's talk a little bit about that. Vibe coding code is, AI generated. A lot of it is, 30%, probably 30% ish guesswork, both by the AI and by the person copy and pasting into IDA. And probably about 20%, caffeine or some other illicit substance. So with actual coding, you generally are planning it out. There's some type of pretty decent structure behind it. It's logical. Again, you've thought it out and you've developed it. You've done some architecture. You've put a bit of thought behind it. With vibe coding, there's generally little to no documentation, again, because the person doing it doesn't really know anything about the program itself. Um, and there's some comments, but they're the AI generated comments. And they could be spotty, they could be not real robust. So, again, kind of flying blind here. With actual coding, honestly, with documentation, probably very much the same. It's kind of spotty, kind of not always real whole and robust, but sometimes you get some really great programmers out there and data engineers out there and data scientists out there that really provide some thoughtful thoughtful variable names, some really great explanations about why things are being done a certain way. Like inline comments, some additional documentation. Uh, but a lot of times not so much, and you're just kind of flying blind there as far as comments go either way. Um, so with vibe coding, we'll talk about in the next piece is debugging, right? So debugging is a conversation between you and the AI, basically copy and pasting errors and getting a response and putting it back in, getting a response, putting it back in. Um, and who knows? Who really knows? Probably neither you or the AI really knows uh, what's going on by the end of it. But you get something that kind of works. Um, with actual coding, debugging is a process. It's part of the process. The first, if you run something the first time and it runs without error, um, one of two things have happened. One, either you are the best programmer in the world, or you've done something very wrong. So generally something's not quite right. So always validate, always rerun it in different situations. But yeah, debugging, with actual coding versus vibe coding is really a structured process. You have some test scenarios in place that you're running through your new program, whether that be an ETL process or some type of front end or end user program, and it is logical, it is intentional, and you're doing some actual troubleshooting and problem solving throughout. um, and with vibe coding, fixing one bug has a tendency to spawn five more. Uh, and you know and with actual coding, fixing a bug actually fixes the bug because you've gone through and and you troubleshot and figured out what's going on. So the vibes of the Codemaster is this next section that I'm getting into here. There's an art to vibe coding that separates it from simply writing bad code. Good vibe code um, really flows. It has some je ne sais kind of that makes it easy to follow, even though it's technically a mess. Uh, Bad vibe code is chaos, and the difference between good vibe code and bad vibe code is probably um, partly the user, right? Again, somebody that understands programming, just like early in my career, I was good at data because I was better at Googling than most people. Um, do I do vibe coding? I sometimes when I am for my personal projects, when I am trying to kind of brainstorm how to do certain things or what I want to do for a project, then I'll kind of do some vibe coding just to get started. Vibe coding is a great way to go from like 0 to 1, right? From I don't know what I really want to do to I've got a concept of a plan. I've got a concept of a plan. I've got a concept of what I might want to do, right? And it might give you some bare bone frame of uh, an ETL script or of a project that you can start to pick through and get into. True vibe coding though is really purely just going back and forth, copy and pasting, not really paying attention to a lot of it. But yeah, I think that there's some value in it for brainstorming. I think there's some value in it for maybe learning if you want to use it as a learning opportunity, especially troubleshooting errors. But true vibe coding, you're not trying to do that. You're just trying to get something out the door and not paying attention to a whole lot. Think of having AI construct a test suite first based on my request, then follow up with interactions to refine some code to pass the test. Yeah, I think that's again. I think to get from like a 0 to 1, yeah, package right, package version 000 to 0. Yes, yeah, exactly. um, but yeah, so that's kind of my interpretation of vibe code and what it is and what's going on out there. So now I told I don't remember who it was last week or maybe earlier this week that asked for it, but somebody had asked for, can you share some common data engineering terms and kind of what the layman's response might be, what how you might explain it to a non-technical person. And I did a video earlier this week on how to explain technical concepts to a non-technical audience, and it was really just kind of high level of okay, basically this is how you would do it, right? Conceptually, this is how you do it. This that I'm getting into right now are going to be some concrete terms of, in data engineering and how you might explain it to, you know, I use construction people and aviation people because my brother-in-law is in construction, and so sometimes I'm explaining things to him, and this is how I've explained things to him, and then I work with some aviation companies and some aviation people, and these are how I've been able to explain things to them. So I actually created a presentation for this. I'm going to share once I remember how PowerPoint works, and then how to share this. Here we go. All right. So, like I said, common data engineering terms. First one, ETL, right? I think we all know right now, by now, hopefully you know by now, if you're interested in data engineering, what ETL is. One of the main concepts, ETL is extract, transform, load. The important piece here is understanding that each of those letters is extract, transform, and load, because sometimes you'll see it as ELT, sometimes you'll see it as ETLT, which is extract, kind of small transform, uh, load, and then transform again, right? So you're pulling it from a source, you're doing some just lightweight transformations or adjustments, cleaning, you're loading it into an end source, into a database, um, and then you're doing your additional transformations. So, but how you would explain it to just anybody, right? It's like transporting raw materials from your job site. Again, talking kind of these construction terms. So, extracting raw materials from your job site, shaping them into some usable components. So, taking your lumber, actually, transforming it, creating a like a wall, right? Creating a frame for a wall, and then you're loading it. You're installing that wall into the building, and so that's extract, transform, and load for construction concept. Um, I clicked on my screen instead of the PowerPoint to go to the next slide. Yeah. So the next one, data pipeline. Again, pipelines, people get confused. This is an easy one to even for, I think, for some junior data engineers to get confused on, the difference between what ETL is and what a pipeline is, and understanding that there is a difference between the two. So for a data pipeline is kind of like that conveyor belt, moving materials, pulling your materials from its source. So think about it as like, we're building a barn for those of you that don't know. And, it might be that conveyor belt for the hay, right? You have the kind of like the hay elevator that you throw the hay bale on and it pulls it up into your hay loft. And so that's kind of like a data pipeline. It's pulling that hay from one place and dumping it into another place. Or, again, a conveyor belt moving materials from one different place on a construction site to another. In some case, it might be the even the route for the dump truck, right? You might have a route that takes your gravel from locally here we have a gravel company called Vulcan, so it's the route from Vulcan to your job site, and it's always the same route for that project, and that truck's going to get and loads the gravel at Vulcan and goes down the road and dumps the gravel at your job site. So that's what a data pipeline is. Data warehouse. So what is a data warehouse? Um, Again, this is one that I think early on, understanding the difference between a database and a data warehouse and a data lake and a data lake house and just all those different kind of conceptuals of where data is being stored. But a data warehouse is really this finished organized storage facility, like a completed hangar storing some well labeled aircraft parts, or I like to explain it also like a library, right? It's your library of all of your categories of different books, right? And in these cases, yeah, analogies specific to an industry. Yeah. So for a library, it's all your different, the library's organized with books. When did data get so watery? Yeah, for real. Um, it somewhere along the line it did. It went from you know information and a database to this very fluid uh, list of different concepts. Um, but yeah, analogies specific to an industry. I think it's important to talk to your audience, right? Make sure that when you create these analogies, and we'll get to this in a little bit, but one of Rita's examples was, when you're talking to an audience, his example was to use ChatGPT to get analogies for how to relate it to that specific group that you're talking to. And I think that's a fantastic real world scenario, uh, where you could use ChatGPT or Claude, um, which is Anthropic's AI, or DeepSeek, and really get some pretty decent analogies. Of for specific for the industry of people that you're talking to and the group of people that you're talking to, if you need some help with that, some help brainstorming that. But it is, I don't know that I'd use it in a interview setting, and we'll get more into why later, but yeah. So data warehouse, it, like I said, it kind of like even a library. And then we'll get into indexing here in a little bit, but the index would kind of be an index, which is a way to make things kind of run more efficiently. Indexing your tables is kind of like creating a card catalog for your library. Anyways, so data warehouse. Data lake. So think of a data lake as a massive storage yard, where you have piles and piles of just unsorted materials out there. Some of it might be useful, some of it might not be useful, and you're keeping all of it anyways. You're just loading all of your materials into this storage yard. Some, like I said, some of it's junk, some of it is reusable, some of it is brand new, and it's just all being thrown in, constantly being thrown in, and you have other people coming to visit that storage yard and trying to extract the useful things. So that's a data lake. And for those of you that are on, let me know your thoughts. Let me know how you would maybe create an analogy for some of these. All right, structured data. What is structured data? There's structured data, there's unstructured data, there is semi-structured data. There is, like Nathan said, when did data get so watery? When did it get so fluid here? What is structured data? Structured data is, when you have an actual blueprint of what materials go where, right? You have a structured data is an example of structured data would be a table in a database. Um, so that's structured data. So again, blueprinted materials with labels, pre-cut steel beams with tags, and so that you know exactly what it is. So that's what structured data is. Um, Unstructured data, again, we have kind of these three different concepts of different types of data. Um, AWS bucket compatible, yes. So Nathan's got a good point here about a data lake, right? Data lakes are your S3 containers, your ADLS containers. Um, they're your storage, right? It is just these big buckets where data is just being piled in, right? Just being piled in its raw form. Um, it's your bronze. For those of you that are familiar with the medallion architecture, this is your bronze layer, right? You're just piling data in. Um, yeah, structured data, just SQLite or Postgres or some other relational database management system. That's what, for those of you that don't know, that's what RDB, RDBMS stands for. So relational database management system. But that's what your structured data is. Absolutely, great. Thank you, Nathan. Um, but yeah, your blueprint materials, pre-cut steel beams with tags. Unstructured data, just random piles of stuff, miscellaneous parts that are left over from previous jobs. Um, you know, again, it's what goes into that data lake. You're just the Bronze Age with cloud storage. Yeah, uh, that's funny. So unstructured, that's what's going in those S3 buckets, those ADLS containers. Just random data from various different sources. Some of it is, you know, JSON data. Some of it might be XML data. Some of it might be CSVs. Hell, some of it might be Excel files. Just random piles of stuff, random piles of data, like miscellaneous parts left over from various jobs. So what's a schema? You've probably heard me say schema several times, maybe even in this video tonight. I use this word a lot. So what is schema? So schema is kind of like a blueprint, an architectural blueprint diagram, defining how each piece fits and where it fits, right? So it's the explanation of the structure of your table, of your database. So, a schema for a table would be all the names of your columns, the types of data that goes in each of those columns, whether it's an integer, whether it is string, whether it is, a decimal, whether it is even an object, right? Depending on the type of database that you might be working with. So that's a schema. What's a primary key? So the primary key is the serial number that's on each beam, right? You might have a serial number. A primary key might also be like a VIN number for a car, right? It's unique to that vehicle. It is very specific, and it could be used to track that item. So that's what a primary key is. So you hear in like crime dramas all the time when somebody has like a prosthetic, body part that for some person that got deceased, they can identify that person because that item has a serial number that they could go back and um, they could go back and look up what that who had that installed, who had that prosthetic installed in them, and so that would be like a primary key. It's unique to that item, to that person, and can be used for identification. And it's not null, right? It's that's the big thing with primary keys. It's not null. Null means that it's blank, right? not to be confused with an empty string, which are two different things, and we might get into that later. So what's a join? A join is like when you are welding together, two different things from two different sets based on matching bolt holes, right? A join might be when you're nailing that cross beam to your frame of your house, to like a frame for a wall. And so that's a join. It's a way to connect two pieces together at a common at a with a common point. Um, Again, for example, we could go back to the prosthetic, right? It's a way to join a person to that item, right? You are joining this table that says maybe clients with a table of purchases, and you're joining based on this um, usually primary key, right? Primary key in one table and a foreign key in another table. Um, and so yeah, pretty good analogies. Thanks. Equals send rather than intuitive line break. Yeah. um, so anyway, so that's join. Partitioning. So I think for a lot of new people, partitioning is this vague concept and is not something that people have even seen before, and it's definitely difficult for non-tech people to grasp what partitioning is. So partitioning is kind of like when you're storing materials in separate sections of the yard, and you're storing it in taking one big pile and breaking it up into a bunch of smaller piles, so it's easier to sort through, right? It's quicker and easier at a glance to sort through. Same concept for your data. Partitioning is breaking a huge huge table up into a bunch of different smaller piles, smaller virtual tables, basically, um, so that it's easier for the database to process and to read all of that data. So that's the concept of partitioning. Indexing, we talked about indexing a little bit ago, just really briefly with my library analogy. So indexing is kind of tagging materials with quick access labels so workers can really find them quickly. The other one that I like to use, especially um, for people that are old enough to understand what a card catalog is, uh, even what a library is, I suppose, and have been in a library. Um, but it is kind of like a card catalog for a library. It's an understanding of how to quickly access data, and basically there's this concept of over indexing and how important it is to not over index tables, but that's a story for another video that is out there already. But but indexing, yeah, it is it yeah, the YouTube chat is kind of a pain sometimes. Um, you have to, if you use shift and enter, then I think you can. Uh, I wonder if that does work. Nope. Shift enter does not work either. So, some system, it is kind of a pain. You just have to, it's just one stream of thought. Anyways, indexing. Batch processing. So you have kind of different concepts of batch processing too, right? Or different concepts of processing. You have real-time processing, where as soon as the data hits, it gets processed, it gets put into your data warehouse. You have batch processing, where maybe every hour or a few times a week, data is being fed in. You have So you have those are the two main types of processing. There's some others out there, but incremental is really batch processing generally. Um, so, but you have this batch processing is kind of like pouring a full load of concrete all at once on a schedule, right? You pour your concrete, the full uh, concrete truck full of concrete. It doesn't fill it up. You go and get some more concrete, come back, and you batch a new load of concrete uh, into your concrete pad, right, into your foundation. And so that's kind of batch processing. Real time processing would be kind of like having this constant stream of concrete just always flowing in. It's like a river of data, right? It's just a constant flow of data from one point to another into your data warehouse, just constantly feeding in. So that's streaming. Again, streaming is the real time processing. So pouring concrete continuously as it flows from the mixer, just keeps on flowing, doesn't stop. Uh, as long as there is concrete there, as long as there's data there, it's gonna flow through. Latency. Latency is latency is when your computer's spinning, right? It's when you see an hourglass, when you just see your computer spinning and you're waiting. It's kind of that lag time, right? It's the wait time between radioing for a supply drop and it actually landing, right? It is when go and tell a worker to run to Home Depot and get another 50 2x4s, and you're waiting for them to come back because they stopped at lunch along the way and you told them not to stop at lunch along the way. And so that's latency, right? Data governance. So what's this? Shift enter does. Oh yeah, it works on LinkedIn, but it doesn't work in this YouTube chat. Where does search algos fit in here? Wait, I don't think I got algorithms in here. We'll have to talk about that. That's a good one. Just a river of bronze cement right into your situation. That's too funny. I love these conversations with y'all. Okay, data governance, safety codes. So the data governance are your regulations, right? They're your government regulations. They're your local, state, and city build codes, right? They're the safety codes and regulations that you have to follow during every phase of your construction in order to launch latency land. You like that? Instead of ETL, you have LLL. Sorry for those of you that don't see the chat. Lunch latency land. Lunch lady land. Yeah, that's great. Okay, data governance is safety codes and regulations that you have to follow for every phase of your construction. So your state and local codes that you have to follow in order for OSHA, your EHS, your for those of you that may be in medical, your HIPAA, regulations, things that you have to follow in order to be safe, in order to protect your data and yourself and your customers. So that's data governance. Data lineage. So it's basically how everything connects together. It's like a family tree. The explanation here is, where you're documenting where each piece of material came from, where it's going, and how it's being used. But think of it like when you do your family tree, right? It's where you came from, your past, your kind of your ancestry, and that's your ancestry is your personal data lineage of where you came from and where you are. That one's a little bit easier. All right. Data quality is when your inspectors come in and make sure that everything's up to code, that you've done everything according to those standards that we were talking about earlier, that everything's clean, that everything is accurate, that the house is not going to fall apart and fall down because um, a stud is not in the right place because there's not a support wall in a proper location. Um, and making sure that the studs are whole and you don't have cracks and again missing parts. So inspecting materials to ensure that they meet standards before you hand it over, before you sell your house to your new homeowners. Normalization, keeping shared parts like bolts in the bolt bin, um, and your nuts in your nut bin, and that could be taken way too many different ways. And and everything's not just scattered around, and everything's not just piled all into the same container, right? Um, you know, I'm sure many of us had fathers like this. I did. Had a dad that he just had this one big bucket, and there were nails in there were screws, there were bolts, there were nuts, and it was just this one big bucket of all the various leftover parts that he had. So that's what normalization doesn't look like. What normalization does look like are those construction people or those dads that had that big. I have a grandfather that was like this, had those big organizational bins with all the tiny little drawers, and each drawer had a different thing in it. That's normalization. Um, when you put your nuts in one of those drawers, you put your screws in another one, you put your bolts in another one, even breaking things down into different sizes. So that's normalization. Denormalization, having extra tools at each station for faster work, even if it means that you have uh, duplicates, right? Even if it means that at every station you have all of the same tools, right? Instead of one central location where you have um, that bucket is the data lake. That bucket 100% is the data lake. The that I was talking about earlier. My dad's bucket was the data lake for sure. Um, so denormalization, having extra tools at each workstation for faster work, even though it means that you purchased a bunch of extra tools, right? Instead of having a centralized location where you have 5 hammers, you have 10 hammers because you have 10 different workstations, and there's a hammer at each workstation. Um, Even though you only have 5 workers. So what's this? So if turtles all the way down, how do we mark the POM on data? That bucket is 100% the data lake. Okay. Data modeling, designing the structure before you build. Yeah. So again, data modeling is like going to your architect and having them draw out the plans for the house before you start building, right? Um, there's a lot of companies out there right now that just go out there and start building a house, and all of a sudden it is like the straw house that the first little piggy built, and that wolf is going to huff and bluff, and that house is going to blow down. Good data modeling is where you got the star schema. So normalization is where we get star schema from. Uh, demoralizing is where we got the star schema. Maybe. Uh, Demoralizing. Okay, data modeling. Again, they kind of like the architecture, designing the house before you go out and start building it. Um, but really having a good understanding, good solid foundation, and understanding of what what you're going to have, where you're going to store it, how you're going to store it. Um, Again, it is before you go out and buy all your nuts and your bolts. It is knowing where they're going to be. Data modeling is knowing where you're going to put all those nuts and bolts and how you're going to organize it before you go out and even purchase them. So that's data modeling and understanding how they're going to come together and how they're going to be joined and be used for your project. SQL, structured query language, SQL, structured query language. You'll hear this as SQL. You will hear this as SQL. They're both right. Don't feel like one's more right than the other. People will make you feel like one's more right than the other. But SQL the SQL part has a long history to it. You could go and look that up, but you'll hear it both ways. So it's like sending a detailed request to your foreman to fetch exactly what you need from your storage yard, right? It is you're telling somebody exactly what parts and pieces that you want, and you're asking them to go out and get it for you, and they're going to return with basically that bucket of my dad's, and it's I pronounce it SQL. Yeah, see. I say SQL all the time too. Every now and again, especially older people that were around when SQL was not the general language. So SQL. For those of you that may not know, SQL was a very specific language. And anyways, you go look that up. I won't bore you with it. But yeah, especially a lot of middle-aged or younger people pronounce it SQL. A lot of older people will tell you you're wrong. I've been in the business for a long time. Anyways, so it's like giving exact instructions. It is it's a request. It's a query. It is it's a way to ask for information. Orchestration tool. So orchestration tool is your project manager, right? It's the project manager making sure that each team is working in tandem on the job site without running into each other, without stumbling over each other. Squeal, like the pig says. Oh, you said squeal. So that's funny. Squeal like a pig says. Yeah. Okay. So project manager, making sure each team is again working in sync, working with tandem on the job site without running into each other, right? Without stumbling over each other, without going and undoing each other's work. That's what an orchestration tool does and helps you with, right? It's there to make sure that everything flows accurately and in the right order. Data Lakehouse. We talked about this one earlier, that this one would be one here. So data lakehouse is that hybrid facility, right? It is where all your raw materials are there, and you have some organized inventory as well, stored together all in one place. So it's this big warehouse where on one side of the warehouse you have all of your piles of stuff, and on the other side of your warehouse you have storage bins for each individual kind of group of items. That's a little bit more organized. And so that's what a lake house is. Same concept, right? You have your S3 bucket or your ADLS container with all of your bronze level, your raw data. You have your tables, maybe your Delta tables. Maybe you've heard of Delta tables like in Databricks, or even if you're using like Synapse, it might be like a serverless SQL server or even a dedicated SQL server where you're taking some of that raw data and you're cleaning it and doing your transformations and putting it into your silver layer, which is your structured tables, and then even your gold layer. In your again, in your medallion architecture, you have a gold layer that really is refining. It is taking, your raw material, your 2x4, and cutting it down to the size that you need to fit into your frame, right? and really making sure that it and building that frame, right, and having, maybe you have your all of your ceiling joists all set and built for your house. And you have them all stored in a location where you just go and grab a bunch of them and throw them up. And that's your kind of your gold level data. So that's generally what would be in your lake house. So that's all we had for that. So, for those of you that may still be on, what some live vibe coding. What's this? Some live vibe coding through Thursday. I got Squeal and Jiffy from the sky. Now he's got his own startup and live streaming a week of vibe coding tower defense game from a literal. Huh. I like tower defense games. That sounds cool. You should share the channel, Nathan. That sounds neat. So that's kind of what I had for tonight. I accidentally ran the full hour, so I apologize for those of you that hung out with me. Thank you all for sticking on with me. Sorry for the cross post. No. Yeah, no, I think that's cool. I like tower strategy games, so you're good. I have to check that out. So let's talk real quickly about things that are coming up. We know that originally we had Nathan that was going to join us next week, but he's flaking on us. Nathan, just kidding, just giving you a hard time. But we'll have Nathan at some point in the near future. I also have a really, I think will be a really cool session with a woman that works as a data professional that works specifically with nonprofits, and I've invited her on, and her name is Lindsay Morgia, but she has a channel out there called The Data Coach. For those of you that haven't seen it, haven't checked her her channel out yet, it's called The Data Coach. She's brand new to YouTube, but she is not brand new to data. She's been in the data industry for a long time, working with nonprofits, specifically with nonprofits, helping them to manage their data, get it into a kind of a centralized data structure, and helping them to do reporting on it and getting things all in one place. And so I'm going to pull her channel up here real quick and show you all. But coach, not couch. She is I've been watching her videos a little bit. She has some great information out there for those of you that want to go and check her out. But again, it's really specifically focused on nonprofit functionality and structure, but really has some great information. Share. And this one. Again, Data Coach. For those of you that haven't checked her out, go out and check her out. Super excited about her coming on. I'm just going to add her link here, but we'll have her on before too much longer. I have just a get to know you kind of call next week with her, and just to talk through what we might talk about and to kind of get to know her a little bit. But she again has been working in the nonprofit sector for a long time, and I want to just get on with her, and really we're going to vibe chat about data, and kind of like Nathan and I did, and she's going to share her experiences in nonprofit and how it might different from a corporate job, or if working with a corporate company. So again, the Data Coach, she is again, she's great. She has 15 subscribers, so if you're interested, be sure you go out there and subscribe to her channel. But she's definitely got some information out there about, again, she's more talking directly to businesses, but definitely stuff that aspiring data engineers could get in and here as well. It's called a raid. Do this drivers where you end your live stream by sending them over to the current live stream. Oh yeah. Again, perspective. I think her perspective from that nonprofit standpoint it will be great. Again, I've recently worked with public sector, private sector, and working with private sector is very different than working with public sector with corporate type jobs. Even working with like enterprise level companies versus maybe mid market or SMBs are each one has its own unique set of pros and cons and advantages and disadvantages. So, but I think having Lindsay on will be great. I think I'm super excited about talking to her next week. Snowflake is not really hard. Oh, are you snowflaking really hard? Maybe. DuckDB, Tableau, Power BI, or Python notebooks, or some other OLAP analytical engine. What I mean? Last thought about Lakehouse. I mean, Lakehouse. My best example for Lakehouse is Delta Lakes, right? When you're in Databricks, and that's the one I think most people are familiar with. Kind of having either ADLS or S3 for your bronze level, and then having Delta Lake laid on top of it. Yeah. Most people that I know don't have a live stream that comes on at 11 p.m. So, but yeah, Nathan, if you decide you're gonna kick off your own channel, then we could always kick off over to your live stream before or after. Awesome. Well, again, I know it wasn't really big and exciting tonight. Sorry, guys. But thank you all for jumping on. I appreciate you all being here. I had a small group this evening, but thank you all. It was still great chat. Sorry for monopolizing all the time, and if y'all don't have any final comments, then I'm gonna let y'all get back to it, and I'm gonna jump off. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Prime Link. Oh, what's that? Is that one you were talking about? No problem, Nathan. Thanks, guys. I'm trying to find out what you're talking about, Nathan. Is it that water tower? That water tower. Yep. All right. See y'all next Friday. Thanks, guys, and talk to you again soon. Have a great week. Let's rate them. Yeah.